Hello everyone, please press subscribe, press follow, press the bell so you don't miss any new clips. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Author by Flying Alone. Audio novels by Novelist. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 86. Lu Yutong breaks through. Under the siege and assault of so many different parties, how could the Cheng clan resist? They were instantly wiped out. Perhaps there may be a few who have fortunately escaped, but with Ling Han's current status in Dayuan City, the survivors of the Cheng clan would be ultimately detested by all. They'd have to keep running and hiding, or they'd definitely be apprehended and delivered straight to the Ling clan, who did not want to befriend Ling Han. There were not many members of the previously flourishing Ling clan who survived. Thus, Qi Yongyi and the others did not leave immediately after eliminating the Cheng clan. They left behind their people to assist the Ling clan in taking control of the situation. But after such a battle, most likely no other party within the jurisdiction of the Dayuan city would dare to make an enemy of the Ling clan. Previously, more than 100 different parties of varying power and might came to Ling Han's aid, so who would not be terrified of seeing a repeat of this scene? All the properties of the Cheng clan naturally fell into the ownership of the Ling clan. However, because the Cheng clan had long been forced into economically dire straits, they were actually almost destitute. However, their minerals still existed, and so did their shop lots. With proper management, these properties would definitely be able to generate a massive income for the Ling clan. After staying at the Ling clan residence for about a day, Qi Yongyi and the others excused themselves and departed. They were about to set off towards Huyang Academy, and since Ling Han would be going to the same place very soon, they did not depart with heavy hearts. After all, they'd be able to see each other again in a few days' time. Meanwhile, Lu Yutong entered seclusion in preparation to break through to Gushing Spring Tier, for she felt that she was really too useless. At a time when Ling Han needed his little female attendant the most, she couldn't even do anything to help him, causing her to feel very dissatisfied with her current ability. Thus, as soon as the danger was over, she immediately began the process of breaking through. Ling Han also needed to stay for a while longer to help take care of some of the clan matters, so he decided to wait until Lu Yutong had broken through to Gushing Spring Tier before taking Ling Xuanhuan and Hu Niu with them to Huyang Academy. The first item on the agenda was naturally the funerals of the clansmen of the Ling clan. Too many people had died, merely the funerals alone took 7 days. Moreover, because too many of their clansmen had died, there was a need to replenish their manpower by a massive amount, or it would not be possible to manage so many different properties. Ling Han was not of much help. He was an expert in alchemy and martial arts, but in such matters, he was completely inexperienced. Thankfully, Qi Yongyi and the others left behind many of their own people to assist, and had promised that they would wait until the Ling clan recovered before calling those people back. In the meantime, Chen Fenglai came once, bringing some news to Ling Han. Chen Pengju had indeed had a slip of the tongue after drinking too much, and the incident of Hang Zhan's murder was known by someone else. That person, after much hesitation, finally decided to go to Stone Wolf sect to tell this secret so that he'd be able to gain some benefits. Who knew that he actually encountered Chen Fenglai, and after Chen Fenglai discovered the whole story, he immediately killed the man to keep him from divulging the secret. Chen Fenglai had come deliberately to express his good faith. The current Chen Fenglai no longer dared to have any thoughts of betraying Ling Han. How many parties stood behind Ling Han? Unless Chen Fenglai had lost his senses, otherwise he would not dare to make trouble. Thus, Ling Han gave him the complete medicine formula to resolve his state of madness as a reward. On the 9th day, an extremely powerful wave of power swept out from the inner courtyard of the Ling clan residence, and the terrifying pressure caused many elite martial artists of Gushing Spring Tier to feel as if their hearts and souls were pounding. Lu Yutong had broken through. Ling Han had been sitting in the middle of the courtyard in the midst of cultivation when a shapely figure flew towards him before stopping at his side. It was Lu Yutong. Not bad. 8 days and you've broken through. Your talent is truly not bad. Ling Han smiled and nodded. Though he had previously given Lu Yutong much valuable experience in battle, but to be able to break through completely within a mere 8 days, Lu Yutong's talent in the field of martial arts was indeed extremely high. Lu Yutong nodded, and in a firm voice, she said, "In the future, I will definitely not become your burden. Instead, I will be a helper you can depend on." "Ha ha, I believe you," Ling Han said with a laugh. After some thought, he said, "Since you've broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, then I'll teach you the 3rd level of cultivation technique of the 3 Yin mysterious arts. Once you've mastered that, you will never need to worry about falling unconscious again." Lu Yutong nodded, appearing slightly excited. This was a heaven-grade cultivation technique, and for a martial arts maniac like herself, it was an irresistible temptation. The two of them returned to the inner chambers, and Ling Han naturally again underwent a test of his own while he had been guiding her in the cultivation technique, causing his emotions to ripple continuously. This young girl was indeed a demon. After much difficulty, he finally finished guiding her in the cultivation technique. Ling Han once again stepped out and continued to sit cross-legged in the courtyard. Previously, the Black Tower allowed him to temporarily obtain the power of Gushing Spring Tier, but it only lasted for 1 hour. And the next time he wanted to make use of the power of the Black Tower again, he would have to wait until he has successfully broken through to Gushing Spring Tier. However, when he has finally broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, he'd be able to gain a preliminary understanding of the secrets behind the Black Tower. He had no idea what kind of surprises awaited him then. Additionally, Ling Han had also achieved the 5th layer of element gathering tier by now. The reason why he had been able to break through so quickly had been because after the blessing of the Black Tower had been used up, though the power he gained very quickly disappeared, it seemed as if a small portion of it had been left within his body. After a few days of digestion, this power now belonged completely to him alone. Initially, he had only required about a month to complete accumulating enough energy to break through to the next layer, but now that he had obtained such benefits, naturally everything went smoothly, and as to be expected, he had successfully broken through. With the stimulation of the 5 elements origin nuclei, his power would soar to the 9th layer of element gathering tier. If he fought with Qi Yongyi again now, he should be able to achieve an absolute victory. My current battle prowess should be about 14 stars, right? Ling Han mumbled to himself. In the field of martial arts, there were many geniuses who could disregard the gap between their own cultivation level and their opponent to challenge someone much stronger than them. Their actual battle prowess did not correspond to their actual cultivation level, and so cultivation level was completely unable to measure the battle prowess of a genius. As a result, the world of martial arts possessed a different way to measure battle prowess, named as battle stars. For example, if a genius whose actual cultivation level was only 4th layer of element gathering tier was able to battle evenly with an opponent of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, his battle prowess would be 6 stars. Within the 9th layer of element gathering tier, Li Dongyu's battle prowess was the weakest, so he only had 10 stars. Jin Wuji should have 11 stars, and Qi Yongyi, due to using the Son of Heaven fist technique together with 3 flashes of fist Qi, should be able to reach 13 stars, Ling Han thought. However, there were too many variables that could affect battle prowess. For example, if Bailey Tengyun wielded the Staff of Destruction, his battle prowess would be enough to soar to 11 stars, but without this staff, his battle prowess would only be about 9 stars. He wouldn't even be able to match Li Dongyue. Some people were the emotional type. Under great rage, or after drinking too much, their battle prowess would shoot up. As a result, while cultivation levels did not change, battle stars were a variable. Only a real-time situation would be able to reveal how many stars would someone reach at their best. In my last life, although my cultivation level was the peak period of heaven tier, my battle prowess should be only about 9 stars, or 10 stars at most. I wonder what level could those freaks have reached? Ling Han shook his head. In his last life, he had spent his time either continuously concocting alchemical pills, or secluding himself to break through to the next cultivation level. Even when he had reached the highest he could go in terms of cultivation level, he still did not seek out the other 6 powerful warriors of heaven tier for a serious spar. When he recalled that, he could not help feeling a bit regretful. And it was at this moment that the sound of a commotion was heard from outside. It quickly transmitted over to the inner court where he was, and became closer and closer. Peng, after only a short while, the commotion had spread to this courtyard. The door was heavily kicked open, and a tall, slender young man entered. This person had an imposing appearance. He was dressed in embroidered clothing, a sword hanging from his waist. His expression was one of extreme arrogance, as if he wanted nothing more than to have his nostrils facing the heavens, making it seem as if coming here had been an exercise of utmost humility for him. Behind him followed a group of servants of the Ling clan. They were all underlings Qi Yongyi and the others had left behind to serve Ling Han. All of them were covered in dirt, as if they had just been beaten up. Some even had their arms broken. This one had not come with good intentions. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 87. Hu Bo. This young man was, in gushing spring tear. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. This person appeared to be only about 23 or 24 years old, yet he had already stepped into gushing spring tier, and had even reached the peak period of the first layer. In Rain Country, this kind of person would definitely be considered a genius. Could this be Feng Yan? In the area of Da Yuan City's control, if you were to ask what enemies he had, then it could only be Feng Luo, who had suffered losses twice by his hand. Could that guy have asked his brother to come back? No. According to rumors, Feng Yan was already in the 3rd layer of gushing spring tier. However, this person was really too tyrannical. He had obviously forced his way here, and when someone dared to stop him, he actually acted to wound them. Young Master Han, this person said he wanted to see Miss Lu, and forced his way through. Some of us tried to stop him, yet were killed by him in their attempt. One of the attendants following behind this young man immediately said to Ling Han, his face filled with grief. Ling Han could not help his anger from rising. Barging his way through was already arrogant enough, he actually dared to kill. This guy, just because he was in gushing spring tier, was actually lawless to such a point. Go. I command you to invite Yu Tong out here. This young man said to Ling Han as if he were ordering around a servant. Ling Han looked at him, and said in a deep voice, "You killed my people. So what? They are only lowly dogs, so what if 1,000 or 10,000 die?" The young man said indifferently, instantly causing the others to be filled with righteous indignation, wanting nothing more than to kill this guy 100 times if they could with their sharp gazes alone. Ling Han gave a humph, and said, "In my eyes, you're lower than even a dog." The young man was stunned for a moment before laughing loudly, and said, "A mere martial artist in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, and you actually dare to insult me? Ha 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 ha, you probably don't know who I, Hu Bo, am, right? I don't care who you are." Ling Han had already leaped forwards, and with a ding, his sword had left its sheath. The sword flew forward, as quick as lightning. "How dare you!" The young man who had proclaimed himself Hu Bo instantly revealed a furious expression. His right hand opened up and origin power formed a golden palm, intending to grab hold of Ling Han's sword. Ling Han's right hand moved, and 5 flashes of sword chi appeared together. Shua, 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 shua. 6 sword images slashed as one, and the large hand formed from origin power was instantly sliced into pieces. Ling Han pushed forward, his sword aiming directly for Hu Bo's throat. 5 flashes of sword chi. Hu Bo could not help releasing a surprised gasp. He once again struck forward with a palm, and another large hand of origin power blasted forward, halting Ling Han's further advance. He could not help a cold smile turning up the corners of his lips, and said, "I never thought that a tiny place like Grey Cloud Town could actually produce a genius that managed to form 5 flashes of sword chi. Moreover, you are obviously only in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, yet the prowess you've shown can be compared to the 9th layer. You should have about 13 battle stars, right?" What battle stars? Those people who had followed in were all at a loss. They had never heard such a phrase before. Heng, but in front of me, no matter how many battle stars you have, it is completely useless. Hu Bo shook his head. The gap between cultivation levels is too big. If I did fight with my full power, I'd be able to kill you in one move. He paused for a moment, then said, I treasure talent, so I will give you an opportunity to live. As long as you become my underling, I not only will spare you, I'll even be able to give you ultimate godly techniques. If Lu Yutong had been able to hear this, she'd definitely laugh her head off. Who was Ling Han? Someone who could casually take out a heaven-grade cultivation technique. So, what kind of cultivation technique did you plan to give him that deserved to be called ultimate godly techniques? Kneel down and accept your death, and I can give you a swift end. Ling Han replied back. Hu Bo was enraged, and said, Brat, being arrogant just because you're a little bit talented is not a good habit. Since you deliberately seek your own death, then let me help you. This time, he made the first move. As his hands moved, his attacks swept out in waves, and his battle prowess had improved to a whole new level as compared to previously. However, it was still only an increase of 1 star. Of course, this star was applicable only to Gushing Spring tier. Ling Han was not afraid. Indeed, his battle prowess was not able to reach the level of Gushing Spring tier, but his defense was awesome. The body a dead tree allowed him to withstand tremendously powerful attacks repeatedly without suffering any injury, and the Indestructible Heaven Scroll allowed him to instantaneously recover whatever wounds he did suffer. It was enough to qualify him for this battle. The two martial artists clashed, and flashes of sword chi soared to the heavens, origin power gushing all over the place. This can't be. Young Master Han was actually so powerful. He can actually fight on even grounds with a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring tier. What does this count as? Didn't young Master Han just slaughter one a few days ago? But that old guy had just broken through, so he definitely couldn't have been as powerful as this one. Murmurs rose up among the crowd, and they were all flabbergasted at Ling Han's might. He was undoubtedly only in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, yet could actually fight on even grounds with a person in Gushing Spring tier. This was practically unbelievable. However, Gushing Spring tier was still Gushing Spring tier, after all. After a couple of exchanges of blows, blood not only stained the corners of Ling Han's mouth, the skin all over his body had also cracked, dripping blood. And this was because he had learnt the body a dead tree ability. Otherwise, suffering such a bout of assault, even his bones would long have been shattered. Facing such a scene, the others could only feel a deep sense of admiration and reverence. This was the gap of a whole tier, yet Ling Han could still manage to fight until such a point. If the two fighters had the same cultivation level, then Ling Han most likely would have been able to kill his opponent in one move. Ling Han's condition was not as bad as it looked. With the circulation of the Indestructible Heaven Scroll, the wounds that he had suffered were actually recovering very quickly. His battle prowess not only did not weaken, it became even stronger with the use of the Lone Wolf's blood. After such a long battle, he had also obtained a rough grasp of his opponent's attacks. Every secret behind his opponent's moves was practically revealed to him. Ziu! His sword suddenly shot forward and 5 flashes of sword chi moved unhindered, as if it was the writing brush of a god, aiming straight for Hu Bo's chest. Hu Bo was extremely shocked. Although all of his moves had their own weaknesses, but how could they have been seen through by a mere martial artist of element gathering tier? But that was exactly the truth of what happened. This slash from Ling Han aimed straight at his weak point, and was heading towards him. In a moment of desperation, he could only raise his hands and place them in a block in front of his chest. Pooh! A spurt of blood sprayed. A wound had appeared on his right palm, and blood was pouring from it. The two fighters had been fighting so long, and finally Ling Han managed to score a hit on his opponent. Hua! The people around them exploded with shocked exclamations, obviously extremely excited. Although Hu Bo had only suffered a single injury, and experienced a little bit of loss, but the crucial point was that he was in Gushing Spring tier. A martial artist at the grand level of Gushing Spring tier was actually successfully wounded by a martial artist in Element Gathering tier. No matter where this happened, it would be seen as a feat of impressive heights. Hubo's face was twisted into a malevolent expression. This stab had not harmed him much, and he had only bled a little, so it was not a serious injury. Yet his hatred for Ling Han had reached astronomical levels. A mere commoner from such a desolate place, and he actually dared to harm him, a member of one of the 8 great clans of the Imperial City, the 7th young master of the Hu clan. If such a piece of news were to spread out, how would he be able to continue facing his circle of friends? Additionally, wasn't this young man's talent too scary? If he really did grow to Gushing Spring tier, how strong would he be? He could not allow Ling Han to live. Hubo had developed a serious intention to kill Ling Han. Previously, even if he had really meant to kill Ling Han, that was the same as a human being casually killing a bug. It was not something that would be considered seriously. But now he really intended to kill Ling Han and put his all into the effort. He slowly drew his sword, and said, "You do have some ability, but this is as far as you can go." Because he was in Gushing Spring tier, he was able to use black-grade martial arts techniques. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 88. Becoming Enemies. Hubo's hand held his drawn sword. His status was a noble one. He was in the uppermost social class below the imperial family of Rain Country, yet had now actually suffered an injury from someone else. This had inflicted a heavy blow on his self-esteem, and there was no way his ego could accept such a thing happening, so his desire to erase this future ruler increased even further. 5 flashes of sword chi, that could be considered a strong enough existence among rulers. You will not be able to kill me today, nor will you be able to do so in the future. You will only die by my hand. Ling Han said deeply. From the moment Hubo had committed murder within the grounds of the Ling clan residence, that already meant this man's fate was sealed. Not even the gods would be able to change his fate. Because this was a man he intended to kill. Hubo, what are you doing here? Ziyu. A figure flashed into the vicinity, and Lu Yutong had appeared. She had been in the midst of analyzing the 3rd level of cultivation technique from the 3 Yin mysterious arts, but hearing the commotion outside becoming louder, she immediately realized that something was not right, and thus immediately leaped out. Her beautiful face was filled with anger, and because she saw that Ling Han was covered with blood, her heart could not help tightening as a powerful killing intent immediately rose to life within her. Anyone who dared to injure Ling Han, they were all unforgivable. However, this Hubo was the 7th young master of the Hu clan, and was of the same social status as herself. Moreover, he was even stronger than her, so she could not act rashly, or she could possibly cause Ling Han's death. This was something she was even more unwilling to see. Yutong. Hubo immediately restrained his killing intent, smiled and said, "Your trip this time took quite a few months. I was very worried about you, so I deliberately came over to escort you back. I don't need you to meddle in my affairs." Lu Yutong said coldly. She pointed at the door and said, "You can get lost now." Yutong, it can't be that you've fallen in love with this brat, right? Hubo's gaze swept over to Ling Han, uncontrollable jealousy brimming in them. Then, this brat is definitely going to die. You dare to take one more step? Lu Yutong slanted her body to stand in front of Ling Han, an icy expression on her beautiful face. Heng, it can't be that you've really been captivated by him. Hubo was about to be driven mad with rage. He and Lu Yutong were both members of the 8 great clans of the Imperial City, and in order not to be pushed around easily by the Imperial family, it was common for the 8 great clans to ally with each other through marriage. After Lu Yutong was discovered to possess such powerful talent in the field of martial arts, the members of the other 7 great clans all started brimming with desire to have her marry into their respective clans, and Hubo was one of her many admirers and pursuers. And, personally, he was very satisfied, because not only did Lu Yutong possess a terrifying talent in martial arts, she was also one of the twin stunning pearls of the Imperial City. What man would not want to marry her? But he had never imagined that she had just stepped out for a short while, and her heart and soul was captured by a wild brat. A mere country bumpkin. I want to kill him. I want to kill this little bastard. He roared with rage, and with one leap, pounced towards Ling Han. How dare you! Lu Yutong stepped forward to parry. Hong! The aura of gushing spring tear exploded. Yi! Hubo gasped in shock, a surprised expression on his face. Gushing spring tear. You've broken through to gushing spring tear. There was no way he wouldn't be surprised. Although it was common knowledge that Lu Yutong was extremely talented in the field of martial arts, but no matter how talented she was, she should have only been able to break through to gushing spring tear after she has passed 20 years old. Moreover, a few months ago Lu Yutong had only been in the 8th layer of element gathering tier, so theoretically, it would already have been difficult enough for her to reach the peak period of the 9th layer of gushing spring tear by now. And to break through to gushing spring tear, she should at least have needed another 1 or 2 years to settle. Though power could be forcibly increased with the aid of alchemical pills, it was impossible to fake one's aura. This was definitely the aura of gushing spring tear, and from the feel of it, she had just broken through quite recently. Genius. She really was a genius. Yutong, I've blamed you wrongly, he quickly said. Being able to break through to gushing spring tear in such a short period of time, how could Lu Yutong have any spare time to get into a romantic relationship? She must have gotten some kind of fateful encounter here, and had been putting all her efforts into breaking through. This must be the reason why she had been staying here for such a long period of time. Get lost. Lu Yutong ignored his words, her palms moved, and a terrifying offensive power rose up. The symbol of gushing spring tear was origin power given form. With the claps of her palms, one after another, giant hands of origin power were formed, flying towards Hubo. And because Hubo felt that he was in the wrong, he did not dare to parry her attacks. He only kept dodging while pleading for mercy. But because he was at the peak period of the 1st layer of gushing spring tear, he was much more powerful than Lu Yutong. Moreover, Lu Yutong had just broken through, so there was no way she would be used to using the increased power that she possessed now, and he very easily dodged her attacks. And more importantly, though gushing spring tear allowed the martial artist to learn black-grade martial arts techniques, Lu Yutong had just broken through, so how would she have had the time to cultivate any? So she was even less of a threat to Hubo. Yutong, calm down. I'll leave. All right, when you return to the Imperial City, I'll look for you again. Hubo retreated, but before he left, he gave a cold glare to Ling Han and said, Brat, don't think that just because you're close to her, you're favored. Yutong is not someone you can have delusions about. If you dare, I will definitely tear you to pieces. Without waiting for Lu Yutong's reaction, his figure took a great leap, and he had already disappeared to a far-off distance. Lu Yutong chased after him for a few steps but then gave up. Hubo was much faster than her. I'm sorry. She raced back to Ling Han's side and said with deep remorse. Hubo had come to the Ling clan residence and killed so many people, yet she was unable to apprehend him. You don't have to apologize, that guy belongs to me. Ling Han humphed coldly. The current him indeed did not yet possess the ability to kill Hubo, but it would definitely not be too much of a wait. Lu Yutong knew that Ling Han was a man who kept his word, so she quickly said, the Hu clan is one of the 8 great clans of the Imperial City, and their power is at the same level as our Lu clan. They also possess a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier as support. You definitely must not act rashly. Ling Han had already guessed that Hubo must have an exceptionally high social status. Otherwise, he would not have been qualified to pursue Lu Yutong. He nodded, and said, Am I the rash type of person? Lu Yutong could not help but observe a moment of silence in tribute of the Hu clan. Although Ling Han was currently only in element gathering tier, his talent in martial arts was higher than her own by 100-fold. And together with his achievements in the field of alchemy, the Hu clan have gained a powerful enemy this time. Though there were still 1,000 things left to do at the Ling clan, Ling Dongxing still forced Ling Han out of the Ling clan residence, commanding him to immediately set off to report at the Huyang Academy. After a moment of consideration, Ling Han realized that his staying here wouldn't help anything anyways, so he might as well set out. He and Lu Yutong brought Ling Zixuan and Huniu with them. However, because Ling Zixuan's parents had both died in the Great Slaughter previously, Ling Han still had to look for someone to take care of these two little girls after they had reached the imperial city. Now, Huniu had slowly gotten accustomed to eating cooked meat, but she was still only interested in eating meat. She wouldn't even touch any kind of vegetable. But she was now exceptionally clingy towards Ling Han. Whenever there was time, she would lean against him like a kitten, resting her little head on his knee. Don't think that she had put away her wild nature though, because to other people, she was still extremely ferocious. But because of Ling Han, she had also become slightly closer to Lu Yutong and Ling Zixuan. Or at least, she would not try to bite the two of them anymore. And Ling Han realized to his extreme shock that this wild little girl never seemed to be able to get full. No matter how much food they gave her, she would be able to easily consume it all. And after she had eaten some demonic beast meat, there actually appeared a spike in her cultivation level, and she quickly stepped into the 4th layer of body refining tier. She had obviously not awakened her spirit base yet, and she had never learnt any kind of cultivation technique before. This caused Ling Han a great shock. Power would not simply appear without reason. For example, the origin power within the body of a martial artist had come from refining the spiritual qi around him. And Huniu did not practice any kind of cultivation, so her power had obviously not come through this channel. Then, it must have come from the food that she had eaten. Could this little girl be able to directly refine the food she ate into her own origin power? When this deduction arose in his mind, Ling Han could not help feeling astonished. What kind of terrifying ability was that? In order to prove the truth of this deduction, Ling Han and Lu Yutong kept hunting down demonic beasts for Huniu to eat her fill. Indeed, the more she ate, the faster her power grew. But there was a limit to it, because her stomach was not a bottomless pit after all. By the time the 4 of them reached the imperial city, Huniu was shockingly already in the 6th layer of body refining tier. This was not as terrifying as Ling Han's own pace of cultivation, but it was enough of a great shock, because even now, she had not yet awakened her spirit base. Ling Han had a feeling that he had picked up a valuable treasure. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 89. Old Demon. After so many days, Huniu finally managed to learn a few words somehow. The word that she spoke the most was meat, and then it was kill, and also Ling Han. She only managed to learn these 3 phrases, which brought the total of her vocabulary up to only 4 words. But, at least she now knew that Huniu was her name, and would raise her head in response when she heard it. She still did not like to walk on 2 legs, but Ling Han had a large influence on her, causing her to unknowingly imitate his actions. By the time the 4 of them reached the imperial city, the wild little girl finally got used to walking on her legs. But when there was no one else, she would still be walking around on all 4s. And she was extremely fast, as if she was a fierce tiger that had finally escaped its cage. Her dislike for wearing clothes did not change though. A new suit of clothes, after only a mere few days, would be torn to shreds by her hands, causing Ling Han and Lu Yutong to feel very exasperated. But Ling Zixuan was extremely envious of this, because Huniu would be able to frequently get new clothes. Entering the city actually required an entrance fee of a silver coin. Since there were 4 of them, they had to pay 4 silver coins. Though this was a paltry sum to Ling Han, but taking into consideration how many travelers entered and exited this city every day, the money that came merely from collecting entrance fees would definitely be an incredible wealth. It was indeed a good life being the emperor. I built this road, so if you want to enter, you'll have to pay. It was completely fair. After the 4 of them entered the city, it happened to be noon, so they decided to find some place to have lunch first before going to report at the Huyang Academy. Meat. Meat, meat. Hu Niu sat down very earnestly, drool already starting to drip from her mouth. Ling Han did not look at the menu, and simply said to the waiter, "Just serve whatever's good, but there must be a lot of meat." "All right," the waiter replied before leaving. There were not many customers in the restaurant in the beginning, but as dish after dish of delicious food was served to their table, it was also soon nearing the time when majority of people would be having their meals. The number of customers in the restaurant gradually increased, making the atmosphere increasingly livelier. Hu Niu did not bother with using any chopsticks. She would simply reach out and grab onto a whole chicken or duck, and within a few moments, she would have completely devoured it. She really had a terrifyingly good appetite. "Aren't you scared of getting your hands dirty?" Ling Han shook his head. He had taught her who knew how many times, yet this wild little girl kept resenting the use of chopsticks because they were too troublesome to use. Hu Niu only gave a giggle in response before continuing to devour the food in front of her. Compared to her, Ling Xuanhuan was much more refined. She would only take small bites, and when she smiled, there would be no sign of her teeth. She had already learnt the basic demeanor of a daughter from a noble house. "What a good-looking young girl," an elderly voice was heard, causing both Ling Han and Lu Yutong to turn their heads to look at the speaker. It was an old man who seemed to be in his 60s. He was dressed in rich robes, and out of the 10 fingers on his hands, there were rings on 8 of them. He was obviously extremely wealthy. His eyes were focused entirely on Hu Niu and Ling Xuanhuan. His stare was so intense that it seemed as if light could be seen from his eyes alone. "Are the two of you the parents of these 2 little girls?" The old man asked as he walked over, but he immediately introduced himself afterward. "I am Chen Yunxiang, the shopkeeper of the Four Seas business. I am quite well known." Lu Yutong shook her head, while Ling Han glanced a moment at this Chen Yunxiang, and said, "We are not their parents, just their relatives." Ling Xuanhuan very obediently smiled at the old man, and addressed him as Grandpa, while Hu Niu only continued to think about eating. In her eyes, nothing was more important than eating meat. Chen Yunxiang seemed as if he liked these 2 little girls very much. He continued to babble on, causing Ling Xuanhuan to break out continuously in laughter, while Hu Niu acted as if she hadn't heard him speak at all. At first, Ling Han only thought that this old man was especially fond of children, and so did not think too much about it. But the old man's gaze became increasingly odd, as if he was a wolf that had focused its eyes on 2 lambs. His eyes were so verdant that they were almost lit up, and Ling Han finally realized that they had encountered an old lecher, and this old lecher's favorite target was little girls. N. Dunno how his eyes were green, but that's what the rules say, probably reference to how wolves' eyes supposedly glow green in the dark. "Come, let Grandpa take a look at your palm lines." Chen Yunxiang could not hold himself back from stretching out a hand to catch hold of Ling Xuanhuan's little hand, revealing his true colors of a lecherous molester. "Pa!" Ling Han reached out and caught hold of the old man's wrist, his gaze severe as he said, "Old guy, you're already so old, and yet you're still unwilling to behave." Chen Yunxiang was not a martial artist, and as he was gripped by Ling Han's hand, he suddenly wailed from the pain of such a tight grasp. He only stopped when Ling Han flung him away, causing him to stumble and fall onto the ground. Raising his hand for a look, there shockingly appeared 4 finger marks on his wrist. They were so green that it looked like they were going to darken into a bruise soon. His expression had also darkened as he gained a new fear in his heart for Ling Han, yet he was unwilling to simply give up to such pretty, cute little girls. Thus, he said, "They're not your daughters anyways, why don't you just name a price?" A spark of killing intent flashed across Ling Han's expression, and he said, "Old lecher, if you dare say another word, I'll kill you." Chen Yunxiang was about to continue increasing his offer and try to convince Ling Han, but when he saw the killing intent on Ling Han's face, he could not help his heart shuddering. He no longer dared to continue making an issue out of it. He quickly turned the opposite direction and fled. However, he would not give up so easily as he thought. "Heng, you don't know what's good for you." Then I'll just ask the people of the Earth and Water faction for help and snatch these two little girls from you." The old man staggered as he left, instantly causing the other customers in the restaurant to break out into raucous laughter. "Brother, that old guy is a famous lurcher, and his main target are little girls. If it was not for the fact that he had always used money to get what he wants, who knows how many times he'd have already been beaten to death," one of the customers who recognized that old lecher said with a shake of his head. Ling Han did not take it too seriously though. The old man was not a martial artist, so his social circle could only include ordinary people. His ability was naturally limited. If Chen Yunxiang had continued to persist, not knowing what was good for him, Ling Han would definitely not have been merciful. Hu Niu was very fast at eating her meat, as if she was afraid that someone would be fighting with her over it. By the time Ling Han and the others had all eaten their fill, she was still eating, and her speed had not slowed one bit. Seeing this scene caused the customers in the restaurant much amazement. They couldn't understand how the tiny stomach of this little girl was able to accommodate so much food. Finally, a bit over 2 o'clock, the little girl finally patted her stomach a few times with satisfaction. She squirmed into Ling Han's embrace, and very soon began to snore. She could eat a lot and sleep a lot. Ling Han stood up to pay the bill. Over 1,000 silver coins had been spent on this one meal. At least 90% of it was in Hu Niu's stomach, proving how much of a spendthrift this little girl was. Thankfully, because Ling Han had killed Hang Zan, Ma Lang, and the others previously, there was no lack of money in his pocket. The four of them exited the restaurant and continued their journey to Huyang Academy. "There are two people who've been following us," Lu Yutong said to Ling Han, after they had walked for a while. Ling Han nodded, and said, "I noticed. But I don't know if their target is our money, or us." If their target was them. A ferocious light flashed through his eyes. Without doubt, it was definitely the antics of that old lecher, Chen Yunxiang. If that really was so, then don't blame him for being merciless. "They're coming," Lu Yutong said softly. At the moment, the two of them had just walked into a remote little alley, with not one other person around them. This was of course what Ling Han had deliberately done. Two sturdy men quickly ran towards them. When they reached Ling Han, one of them tried to carry off Ling Zixuan, while the other reached out towards Ling Han, intending to snatch away Hu Niu, who was still sleeping in his arms. These two sturdy men were not martial artists. They were only a bit stronger than normal people. After all, out of every 10 people, there would only be one that possessed a spirit base, so martial artists weren't really that common. Ling Han smiled. He not only did not resist, he even raised his arms a bit, allowing the man to easily snatch Hu Niu away from his hold. The man could not help being stunned for a moment. Such a reaction was something that he had never even considered would happen. Meanwhile, due to the movement, Hu Niu was awakened. She was like a wild beast, and possessed a very alert nature. When she discovered that she was held by an unfamiliar man, a ferocious light immediately shone in her eyes. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 90, unwilling to give up his evil intentions. Though Hu Niu had yet to awaken her spirit base, she had already stepped into the 6th layer of body refining tier because of her continuous eating. What kind of concept was that? Ordinary adult men, even if there were 20 or 30 of them working together, could not possibly be able to match her. Discovering that she was in the hold of an unfamiliar man, Hu Niu's ferocious nature instantly flared up. Pa! Like a tiger waving its paw, her hand connected with the large man's face. Pooh! The large man's head slanted, and 7 teeth as well as a mouthful of blood was instantly spat out. He immediately fell onto the ground. Hu Niu somersaulted in midair and landed steadily in a crouch on the ground. Her mouth opened, revealing 2 canines. Her 4 limbs pushed off the ground at the same time, and like a fierce tiger that had finally escaped its confines, she pounced at the large man. Her hands pressed down on his shoulders, and her mouth was already lowering down in a bite at his throat. Ling Han hurriedly acted and picked up the wild little girl. He definitely did not want this little girl to kill. If she had, then all his and Lu Yutong's efforts would have been wasted. Even so, the large man that had been knocked down to the ground had already paled in fear. His throat released a shrill shriek. If they hadn't seen it or heard it themselves, it was really unbelievable that such a tall, sturdy man would actually be able to release such a sissy sound. The other large man was more fortunate. With a knife hand from Lu Yutong to his neck, he had instantly passed out. "If you scream once more, I'll kill you," Ling Han said. The large man hurriedly covered his mouth with his hands, as if he was a young maiden that had encountered a pervert. Ling Han placed Hu Niu back down. The wild little girl's ferocious nature was restrained with much difficulty, and she kept baring her teeth at the large man, giving out a low growl. The large man screamed again due to fear, but when he recalled Ling Han's threat, he hurriedly covered his mouth again. I am a disciple of the Earth and Water faction. If you know what's good for you, you'll let me go immediately. The large man threatened, though he did not look very confident. He was shuddering in fear even as he spoke, his face pale. Ling Han turned to look at Lu Yutong and asked, "What's the background of this Earth and Water faction?" "It's an underground party of the Imperial City. Because some things cannot be done publicly, even the 8 great clans would occasionally make use of the power of this party to do some dirty deeds," Lu Yutong said. She thought for a moment, then continued, "The faction chief of the Earth and Water faction seems to be named Yang Tiandu. He's in the spiritual ocean tier, and mingles very well with the upper-class parties of the Imperial City. In the field of martial arts, the lines between cult, faction, sect, association and society were very strictly drawn. To be able to possess the name of faction would require a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier as support." Ling Han gave an "oh," and once again looked back at that large man as he said, "I don't care if you're Earth and Water faction or Heaven and Water faction. I ask a question, and you give me an answer. If I'm not pleased with your answer, then I will sever one of your limbs. You can count how many times can you afford my displeasure yourself." The large man's face paled and he hurriedly nodded without stopping. He was not really afraid of Ling Han, rather, he was afraid of Hu Niu. This little girl gave him the feeling that she was a fierce tiger, with absolutely no way to reason with her. Who would not be afraid of that? "Chen Yunxiang sent you?" Ling Han asked. Yes. "How many times have you helped him do such deeds?" The large man hesitated for a moment, but when his eyes fell upon Hu Niu, he could not help shuddering. He hurriedly answered, "I can't remember exactly how many times, but there should definitely be 10 times. There were actually as many as 10 times. Ling Han gave a humph and struck the large man's chest with his palm. Due to the shock wave from his origin power, he instantly crushed the man's heart. To help a villain commit evil, they deserve more than death. Lu Yutong had already developed a tacit understanding with him. She immediately struck forward with a stab of her sword and killed the man who had fallen unconscious. She then sheathed her sword and said, "Just leave that old fiend to me. I will have people from my clan deal with him." Ling Han considered her words for a moment before nodding in agreement. He knew that Lu Yutong was acting in his best interests. After all, this was the Imperial City, under the direct jurisdiction of the Emperor. Even if it were the 8 great clans, they would have to think twice before doing something. If he killed someone right after he had arrived and this information that could be used against him was acquired by someone who intended him harm, this could possibly result in the thunderous rage of the imperial family. At that moment, not even Zhu Hixin and Zhang Weishan would be able to protect him. Rain country belonged to the Qi clan, after all. However, as for these 2 little foot soldiers in front of them, even if they died, there would be no one to pay special attention to this matter. Chen Yunxiang was the boss of a business, so his influence could either be small or large. For Lu clan, as one of the 8 great clans, it'd only be too easy if they intended to deal with a businessman. Moreover, Chen Yunxiang did not have a clean history, so just randomly collecting information on some of his bad deeds would be enough to ruin him completely. Ling Han too had not taken such a minor character seriously, so he naturally would not reject Lu Yutong's kindness. The 2 of them continued on their journey towards Huyang Academy. The imperial city was extremely big. It was at least 10 times the size of Dayuan City, and after an hour, Ling Han and the others have finally arrived at the entrance to Huyang Academy. They were immediately halted in their advance. This was not a place that anyone could simply enter. I am Lu Yutong. Lu Yutong removed a silver plaque and handed it over to the 4 guards who were stationed at the entrance. So it is true disciple Lu. One of the guards closely examined the plaque, and quickly handed it back respectfully. We did not know it was you, so please forgive us, true disciple Lu. Lu Yutong waved off their apologies. She was currently veiled, so it was only logical that they did not recognize her. She pointed at Ling Han, and said, "This is my friend, and he needs to enter the academy for an important matter. Register him for me." Understood. The 4 guards nodded. Huyang Academy had very strict rules. Disciples of the academy were indeed allowed to bring visitors into the grounds of the academy, but the latter were not allowed to stay the night. Upon their entry, they would be registered, and if they had not exited the academy by night, then the disciple who had brought them in would be severely punished. After registering, Lu Yutong took Ling Han to a courtyard. This was where the teacher who was in charge of welcoming new disciples was stationed. Because the new year had just passed, there was a huge group of new students that would be coming to report here. After Lu Yutong had led Ling Han here, she then left with Ling Zixuan. The little girl had come here with the place of enrollment that Ling Dongxing had gotten through his deal with the academy, and so would not need to go through the ordinary channels of registration. On the way here, Ling Han had heard about a lot of matters regarding the Huyang Academy from Lu Yutong. Here, students were separated into 3 categories: ordinary disciples, true disciples, and core disciples. Ordinary disciples were simple enough. You'd be considered one from the moment you enter the academy. The true disciples were much less in number, only 30 in total. In terms of cultivation resources, they could gain 10 times the amount of resources available to ordinary disciples, so they were the object of envy for ordinary disciples. There were 2 conditions for becoming a true disciple. Firstly, you'd have to at least be in element gathering tier, and secondly, you'd have to be in the top 30 strongest disciples of the academy. As a result, competition was extremely fierce. However, Ling Han won the first place in this year's Dayuan tournament, so he would be instantly recognized as a true disciple upon his entry, though this was only valid for 1 year. There were also the champions from 36 other cities who would be able to obtain such a reward, which meant that by the end of the year, 36 people would have to be disqualified, and after that, the true disciples that were ranked from the 21st place to the 30th place would have to face challenges from the 10 strongest ordinary disciples. If they lost, they'd be demoted back to being ordinary disciples. This was also why Qi Yongyi and Jin Wuji had returned to compete for the first place in the Dayuan tournament. Because even as strong as they were still not true disciples. End of the chapter. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao will be read in 5 chapters for every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. Please leave this sound novel and press subscribe, follow, and the bell so you don't miss any new clips as well. See you.